make a bit of a more intimate setting.
Maybe you can make the circle a little bit smaller, otherwise there's empty seats. So if we move forward, very nice small circle here around digital rights.
I guess that's the first session for everybody.
Everybody,
This will be everybody. Yes.
And then I have to see if this works. I think so. You will do the introduction, right?
Hi. Just really briefly, I just have to read a little thing just to check you're okay with being recorded and stuff later. So welcome on behalf of Expertise Network Systemic Co-Design at this workshop. So we basically just want to check that Joya, who was mentioned earlier, who will be recording, that you're okay for her to basically pop in and just take a short film of you. None of you will be asked to be interviewed or to speak at this time. She's just taking short snippets of a video. And should you wish to speak later and be interviewed, you're able to do that. There's a sign-up sheet in the hall. Is there anyone who's not okay with being videoed? Digital rights and all that? No? Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Yes, and as this session is being recorded and live streamed, actually, we'll have to speak through a microphone. So I know we're in a super intimate setting, and this might seem a bit overdone, but this is for the live stream and for the recording. Welcome everybody to this workshop on digital rights. The workshop will be in the setting of a panel. That was the idea. We have 6 panelists for today, but I think we have 4 audience members, so let's make it a wonderful conversation rather than an expert panel. Also, I think in line with what was said this morning, let's break the ivory tower and let's make it a level playing field.
reminds me, maybe it's...
But you need the mic.
You need the mic. Yeah, I need the mic.
We have 5 microphones, so let's equally share them.
Yeah, which reminds me, I think since we are with a few people, it would be nice to do a small introduction round.
Perfect, yes. I was going to say, because I have some introduction slides as well, but maybe let's do an introduction round, and then I'll do a brief introduction of the topic of today. But let's start with a round. Wina, since you have the microphone.
Well, I think I introduced myself already at the beginning of this morning, but I don't know if everybody was there. I'm the chair of the Expertise Network Systemic Co-Design and also a professor at Inholland Applied University in Societal Impact Design. And next to that, I'm also a member of the Digital Rights Foundation in Amsterdam. And that's together with Jake and with Rosa. So maybe I pass the microphone.
Yeah, so I'm Jake. I'm a co-founder of Digital Rights House and also an entrepreneur. I'm involved in a startup that wants to develop and launch a communication platform that does not want your data. So if anybody is interested in that after the workshop. And I hope that my point of dignity and privacy are maybe 2 of the same things or 2 sides of the same coin in a world with more tech could be discussed a bit more during this session.
I have one already, yeah. Hi, I'm Anouk Geenen. I'm a design researcher with Wina at Inholland. And last week I successfully defended my PhD thesis on... thank you. Just lengthening all the celebrations, but on smart city controversies. So my research also really focuses on digital rights and public values in the digital realm.
I have also a mic. Oh yeah, it's working. Hi everybody, my name is Rosa Louwerse and I'm the manager of the Digital Rights House Foundation. In that role, we're trying to raise more awareness for digital rights in the city, especially with citizens. I think that's also one of the topics of today. How can we involve more citizens in this maybe abstract topic? And I'm looking forward to see how we can connect co-design and digital rights today in this wonderful conversation.
I'm Anouk Keijzer. I'm a professor at both Inholland and Avant on the topic of data science and artificial intelligence. And my work mainly focuses on privacy-preserving data management and on transparency of data.
Hi, my name is Ben Wagner, and I'm a professor of media technology and society at Inholland University and a professor of human rights and technology at TU Delft, which is a lot of words for saying I like working on digital rights and excited to see everybody else here.
Hi, my name is Queenie Clark. I'm a PhD student at University of Brighton, and my research is about human dignity and the planning process, so how people are involved in public consultations, and I'm specifically working with homeless and vulnerably housed communities.
Hello, I'm Pieter van Bohema. I was just on the panel before, so I'll keep it brief. I work for the Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences on artificial intelligence, and I am the director of a foundation called Post-X Society. It's about societal transitions and democratic control.
Hi, I'm Siddharth D'Souza. I work as a postdoctoral researcher at Tilburg University on data justice and data governance. And my interest in this topic is because I'm looking at digital rights from a social movements perspective.
Hi, everybody. My name is Donna Horgan. I'm an architect and service designer by background, but presently working at Inholland. I'm a lab lead at our Urban Leisure and Tourism Lab in Rotterdam Zuid, and I also work at Erasmus University in Rotterdam. Very interested in this topic. My own PhD was looking at social innovation systems for building resilient communities, which looked at smart cities and various things to do with participation in urban planning. So really encouraged about this conversation. One thing to say is that I have to meet with a student at 11, so I'm going to have to drop out, but I'll come back in, and no disrespect to the group, please.
I have one, yeah. I got Wina's. Peggy van Schijndel. I'm the Managing Director of the Creative Business Research Center at Inholland University of Applied Sciences, in which we took the initiative for the expertise network system and co-design.
Cool. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for these introductions. I had a bit of an introduction to the topic, so I'll just go over that. But again, we're in this conversational setting, so I'll also stay seated to not be too much of a... make it too strange, the context. Who's who? We've done that. Okay, so then the setting that we're talking about today, digital rights. I think to set a scene, I looked up some headlines. I'm sorry, these are all Dutch, because I was expecting a mostly Dutch audience, but I can happily translate them for you, because I think if you only look at the last month, you already see how much headlines we had talking about the digital world that we're living on. And for example, X, former Twitter, is about to collect biomedical data. We have TikTok that's inviting a British security agency to enhance the trust for EU citizens, because we are very much distrustive of technology that's coming from China. And what happens with that data in a different setting, not leaving alone the question of what happens with data in a European setting, in a Dutch setting. I think that's very much a question as well, because that brings me to another headline, which you see that about the toeslagenaffaire in the Netherlands, the childcare scandal that we had here, where a lot of data collected by the Dutch government actually destroyed a lot of citizens' lives, you could say, or how the data was analyzed and applied. And I think these headlines already show that the digital world is really invading kind of how we are living together, right? And it's bringing all of these challenges, and how are we going to work with that? Which brings us to the topic of digital human rights. We have the International or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where topics as dignity, freedom, brotherhood, privacy are all pronounced. But how does that translate now to the digital setting? Luckily, there's many movements already going on that, such as the Digital Rights House, which we have here today, which are questioning, or which are also emphasizing how can we translate human rights to digital rights. And we're doing that today, discussing this topic in the setting of systemic co-design. And just, I think we're all aware of what systemic co-design is, or what it basically entails, but just a brief reflection also on the point of view that we're embracing here during this panel or this conversation, is this idea of multiple perspectives, right? I think if you look at co-design is very important that you engage your user, or the envisioned end user of your product or your service or your system, in your design process. Systemic co-design takes that further, and not only looking at the user and who will use it, but also what might be the effects beyond that. So what might be the second-hand effects, what might be future effects, what can be other implications that we want to take into account. And today we're bringing them together. We had planned two different sets of questions, one regarding the stakeholder network that comes into question when we're talking about digital human rights, and also the systemic aspect of that. So digital rights are a question of governments, citizens, corporations, public and private sector are mixing. How do we bring that together? And the second question, or the systemic perspective that we can take to digital rights, is the value networks, right? So we're talking about human rights, we have this declaration, but how do all these rights and values relate to each other? So those are two topics that we'll discuss today, and the idea was to do that with positive provocations. So we'll have a set of statements, kind of to stir up debate, bold statements to tease out reactions from the panelists, or now from all of you. And I had a set of statements to test that out, and maybe just to test the sphere in the room. Let's start with this one, and raise your hand if you agree, I would say. So computers are always biased. And maybe Peter, because you still have a microphone, can I invite you to say why you think that?
Well, the computers are always made with an intention by people, and they always have a perspective on the world. And those are fundamentally always biased.
And then I think there were also some people who didn't raise their hands. So maybe...
Let's do this.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, the computers are not the ones who are biased, it's the data that is biased. Computers just follow rules, a set of prescribed rules, and it's the data that brings in the bias.
It's great to disagree with everybody else and Anda. It's always so much fun. So it's not that computers are not biased, it's that they are not necessarily always biased. There are situations where they can be not completely unbiased is difficult, but always just biased would be difficult. But there are, like, when a computer does a mathematical operation that is not necessarily biased, but the context behind it, to put, let's say, a Totschlagerfair decision into a mathematical context is biased. So I'm sort of agreeing with you, sort of agreeing with Anda, but also disagreeing with everybody. Does that make it easier?
I think this is a wonderful setup for the rest of the conversation. And as these are just warm-up questions, I will go to the next one. Human oversight of computers doesn't work. Again, agree. If you agree, please raise your hand. Then we'll invite Peggy to share her thoughts.
I'm the least specialist of all here, but I just think, yeah, I am. I think, this world is way too complicated to have it deal with it with human oversight. So I think it's so complex.
It's too complex for human oversight alone.
Yeah.
And then I think there were Ander, I saw you looking very strong, or Jake.
Let's get it on. No, no, it has to be that human oversight works. Otherwise, we should not be on this planet. So that's my introduction. And I think we still have the opportunity of having human oversight in total. Or we go into the situational part. Is human oversight on Facebook, what they do, were effective or not? But for the sake and for the introduction, I would say that I would disagree with this positive provocation, I think it's called, because we need to keep it this way.
But then, may I ask, Jake, is it oversight or governance? Because yesterday we had this impressive keynote speaker, Joyita Gupta, who said we need worldwide, we need different governance for SDGs, and maybe this is about the same issue.
Yeah, nice, and thank you for the opportunity to have even more podium time. But because it's oversight with a capital O, if I look at it correctly, then I would say that it could mean that humans also use computers for their role of oversight. So I will, as long as possible, keep the opportunity of human oversight alive in the discussion. So.
Any other reflections?
The reason for the provocation wasn't to say that it shouldn't be, but rather that it's ineffective at present. And so the problem is that the assumption that human oversight works allows us to introduce technical systems in the first place. And the introduction of technical systems is premised on we have the ability to control them. And if we didn't have the ability to control them, we might not build them, or we might build them differently. And I see a lot of problems from this sort of almost like God complex-like idea of like human ability to control technical systems, when it's clearly, all of the research shows that we can't, a lot of the time, control them very well. So if we start from the assumption that we're terrible at controlling technical systems, we might build different technical systems and different oversight regimes. But that would be a good starting point.
Of course, and thank you. We'll see each other. We're in the same discussion, right? Yeah. So
I tried hard to disagree. I really did.
Exactly. That's to warm up, right? Now, so if oversight is more than control and technical systems are larger than computers, because you introduced the two terms, I would say that I think another statement is that the difference between computers and software, like in the first statement, is also becoming less and less. So if technical systems are becoming actors in the society that get roles, then the question is, when is the moment that they get roles that we do not decide, but they decide themselves, and we agree to? So even to go into the future, if it's all a development, and we want to somehow understand this development and hopefully go towards a positive future, then we must maybe adopt and accept technology because we created it. But we still are looking for the best way to coexist with it. So I'd also love to give technology a podium as an actor.
I think it would be useful, though, to look at some... Do we need the microphones?
Yeah, it's being recorded and live streamed, hence the...
Okay, hello to everyone who's looking at us live. I think that we should look at some analogous other kind of areas, because obviously kind of there have been other infrastructure built previous to digital infrastructure. So, for example, if we look at planning and the development of built infrastructure and the, I suppose, the governance patterns of human oversight in that respect, humans don't have a fantastic track record. So I think that we should try to see what lessons can be learned from other systems or other infrastructure development contexts, in particular the built environment, which has a lot to offer in terms of equally the language around development of software comes from architecture. So there is a lot of crossover, even conceptually, in terms of how users of any stage can be involved in processes. So I think that there is a lot to be taken from other oversight mechanisms that potentially haven't been great so far.
Yeah, it's working. Yeah. Once I had a conversation in a company who develops software for different companies, and we were talking about digitalize and how it affects in our daily lives. And then there was a software engineer, and he was very enthusiastic about it. Yeah, I'm very worried in my personal life about all these things, but if I'm just aware of the fact that I can do maybe something in my work as well. So people tend to see it as like it's a very important topic from a personal perspective and for all society. But if I'm just doing my job as a software engineer, I'm not in control, or I don't have the responsibility to make statements that things can be done differently. And so that's also an interesting point, I think, if you see the statement of human oversight. So what's the responsibility of people just working in technology fields themselves, even if they are not the boss or the manager or whatever? So that's something that I want to bring in as well.
Thank you. And I think I have a question, or that relates to that, or a provocation, pardon. Digital rights are a design issue, and I think we can also extend that to, are they an engineering issue? It is indeed, who is the person or the group, the people deciding on this? Are the designers of the software, the engineers, the people, the policymakers who are inviting these softwares into the built environment, the smart city, or whatever sphere it might be? How would you reflect on that? Are digital rights a design issue?
So we raise hands if it's yes?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Are we agreeing?
Are
we agreeing? Almost. I see 3 people not agreeing. Might be interesting to hear.
I think it's a design issue and a lot of other issues. So I just think that sentence makes it sound like it's only a design issue. So that's why I'm going.
That was the doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we still agree, I think. Or do you really disagree?
Well, yeah, it's to some extent it's a design issue, but I think at first it starts as a societal issue, and that is a much bigger issue than the design issue. I think that would follow from, you would start designing once you know what the societal desires and values are. So, yeah, I think there's a priority or like levels there.
Yeah, or I think it should be common practice for a designer, if it's a UX designer or a programmer or whatever, that they are aware of what they are creating and what it can do. And I think we don't do this really well yet in education, for instance. I think we could be more, yeah?
Is the question potentially then, is policy in itself a design issue? So, by separating digital human rights from other rights, is that a necessary division? But equally, I would say that what you just said about in terms of, I think it's more about policy actors really considering what the impacts of their decision makers in a whole set of spheres, not only in the digital sphere, if that makes sense.
Maybe I can just add to it. I think the statement also opens up the question of what do we actually mean in terms of where design resides. Is it, and I think as you said, is it when it was framed, the first thing that came to mind is it seems like it's a very technical framing of the question. But if we look a little more deeper, and if we're looking at it systemically, if we're looking at it in terms of questions of justice, I think we need to perhaps unpack what design is in this particular relation to digital rights.
It kind of gives, in this, to me, the impression that design is like about application of this. So it's not about so much it's how do we apply these human rights in this situation and design that in that, to me.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Is it contextual or is it the skills or what is it? I think that's important.
Yeah, so if I would add to that, then from the definition that digital rights or digital human rights are human rights in a digital world, that's at least how the United Nations states it, I adopt that definition. So then I would say that if a designer is a creator, a maker, an inspirator, in the role of a designer, you want to, in my opinion, explore, discover how technology can be an opportunity for the world, for us as society. And in that sense, maybe it's an interesting time because just a sidestep, some time ago, everybody was falling over the word of ethics, but at the end of the day, it became a checklist, and it's like privacy has become a guardrail or something. But in another municipality, in not the one that we're in now, but in another one in Holland, they are exploring what the privacy opportunity is. So approaching, say, the topic of privacy and what the law says that we need to comply to, that is also an opportunity to become a city that we want to be. And in that sense, it says that you can design what you want to be. And I like the idea that digital human rights, and in my opinion, all human rights, privacy, dignity, equal freedom, etc., need to be at the start of a process. Because, I like the idea that we can design the future in a way that we want it to be.
Thank you. And then I'll move to the next point, which is very similar, but I think that also touches a bit on the fact, as you said, it's an issue of many things. And I think, so the statement here is digital human rights are a systemic issue. It's not only a design issue, it's many, many more issues. And I think also the question here is maybe to unpack a bit, what is the systemic aspect? We're here at the Systemic Co-Design Conference. What is the systemic aspect, according to you, when it comes to digital human rights? And maybe, Wina, thank you also for remembering that. And the other, just a moment ago, raise your hand if you agree with this, please.
We agree.
Jake is the dissonant in this.
He wants to talk again in this field. So now you have to say why you're not agreeing. And then the rest can respond.
Yeah, so I'm happy that I'm invited, and I'm certainly happy that we are also, I think, signing the partnership with the network as Digital Rights House. But just for the discussion, right? A systemic issue. The thing that we have to keep in mind is that also, if everything is systemic, starting there, then it doesn't make it easy to solve. Yes, I'm for 99% pro a systemic approach to a lot of stuff. So I'm a pro systems, how do you call it, and doer. Yeah. But I want to pinpoint one part that is, in my opinion, more important than the system, and that's the individual. And yes, you can say it's the first or the second or the third, how do you call it, audience or contributor. But if we approach everything systematically, then somehow I sometimes get the impression that the user or the individual, the human, becomes part of the system. And I prefer to defend that there is a lot of humans, and then there are systems. So digital human rights in a digital world, yes, are in a systemic issue. No, it should be also approached before we make it a systemic opportunity.
So really emphasizing the individual experience of the human rights, maybe in a systemic perspective after that. Does anybody want to respond to Jake? Because he was the only dissonant in this room. Or shall we move on?
This time, those two there
I'd like to, I mean, isn't then your conception of human rights quite limited in a sense, because you're looking at it only in terms of individual rights? There is evidence that digitalization has substantial collective harms. How does one sort of account for the fact that there are collective rights that apply to people differently depending on race or gender or caste or class? And these cannot just be understood if we looked at it in an individual perspective, because we would need other lenses.
Yeah, this is obviously the only or the main counter to what I said. So I would agree on the fact that looking at stuff collectively and the world as a set of humans and not individuals, that is very necessary. At the end of the day, for the discussion, I believe in Article 1, which is like the Human Rights Declaration, and that all other articles are like deepening it. And we are all equal, and that you can interpret that as a collective. That you have to. That's the opportunity. But at the end of the day, if you ask me, and which of these topics in the Article 1 do I put forward the most? Freedom, equality, dignity for all, or brotherhood? And then I choose dignity, which is an individual perspective. So I believe that if all individuals act in dignity, that we have a better society. And I believe in, I'd love it to be a collective thing, but at the end of the day, I also believe that one person can make a difference. Hopefully this raises more reactions. Yeah.
Human rights can't be divided. You can't choose. They're all equally important. So that would be my response. But also, I would agree with you that human rights is a limiting frame. We'll see. Also, we have group rights, people rights. So to me, human rights are not a set thing. Of course, they have been agreed upon in the United Nations, but maybe we need new rights, in light of this digital world. So that's also something I would like to open up this discussion. I feel like certain rights are just not there yet, and we have to create processes to claim new rights and not just be satisfied by this charter that we already have.
Can you make an example of the right that you misses?
For example, the right to have human contact instead of being confronted with computer systems. The rights around ownership of data. Of course, that is a very legally difficult subject, but maybe we could also look into that. Rights around platforms, economies, network effects, all these typical characteristics of digital systems, which are not accounted for in the human rights at all.
And if you you want to react as well. For instance, the first example, like that you have the right to have an contact with a human.
Yeah.
If you look at Article 1, there is like we live in freedom, dignity, equality, and brotherhood. Do you see then, if you pointed out you have the right to have interaction with a human, it seems to me that you see that the computer has the same rights as a human has.
Does it? Oh.
Because you make, how do you say it? You make it equal.
No.
So you can say like, if I don't feel my equal freedom is, or I don't feel dignity for myself if I'm talking to a computer.
Yeah.
How do you then see the right to have contact with a human?
Well, then that is for me a new right, an important new right. That you should always have the human alternative next to a system. So computer systems are not as important as humans, so they're not equal.
Yeah, so then it's already there in Article 1, if you understand. Because I don't feel my dignity
I would interpret
respected.
it like that, but I think a lot of people would disagree.
It's interesting.
No, but it's obviously a big topic, right? So the influence of digitalization or all technologies in a broader sense. I would say a train or a boat is also technology, so in the broader sense. But digital human rights, if you adopt how the UN looks like, and that's how we do it at the Digital Rights House, then it's human rights in a world with more technology. And looking at that, then we still think that Article 1, which is the top of the iceberg, can be sufficient as a direction for how we cope with or develop further technology. And in that sense, there would not be a necessity to have a different or new rights added to it for the discussion.
I would disagree.
Ooh.
What about the guys?
Yeah, I'm sort of on your side because equality also means that so if you have to rely on technology, but you can't, then you're per definition not equal, right? Because I can't get access to the same services or things in society. So I think that having the right to talk to a human instead of a computer could be in there.
But then that's a solution, right? To solve the equality issue, the solution is to have, in the systemic situation, in the design, to have a human always there to talk with you. And then you solve maybe the right to be equal.
Yeah, but aren't there other cases where equality are specified as well in Article 1? I mean, I'm not the legal person here, right? So, but I think Article 1 was recently adjusted to include very specific traits and of humans that cannot be, what do you call it?
Discriminated
against. Yeah. So, and actually, I was against that because by defining individual traits, you're basically saying that everything else is less important. So. We've already crossed that border, didn't we? But this is a discussion that is difficult. I agree.
It is.
I'm not so I wouldn't say that we need to have a deeper, longer conversation about new rights or translation of rights, as long as we agree on the goal, which is some form of rights in specific contexts. And this conversation is very old, right? Of like, is this an interpretation of the existing rights or do we need a new right? And there's a lot of politics also behind it. When the treaties are opened up, the current environment is not very human rights friendly. So if it's possible to do it under interpretations, it tends to be easier. That's the sort of the current status quo around sort of if you were to try and get new human rights treaties pushed through now, they would have a much lower standard than what exists currently in law. So a lot of the time, the digital human rights debates are not so much about trying to get new rights, but more about trying to just have the rights that already exist there just implemented. And that's already hard enough, because on a day-to-day basis, that implementation is either not present or completely ignored. To add to the list of news articles, I saw something about the Dutch tax office has decided that it's unable to implement the right to privacy, and it might be able to do so by 2027, but it's not sure yet. So this is like this is a big government institution with a lot of resources, a lot of money, a lot of power, and surely the ability to do that in practice. But if they're struggling with it, everybody's struggling with it. So I think that there's a lot to do just in terms of implementation of what's already there. And then, of course, new rights can come in and might make sense, but they can also just to be interpretations, or I don't think it needs to be Article 1, but like the interpretations of what's there, essentially. And that makes it a lot easier to get results and like tangible things to people faster, which isn't to say that that will never be necessary. It's definitely possible, but it's not an easy thing to get new rights in that way, especially if you're talking about treaty change in sort of the near, mid, even long term, honestly. So
maybe to add to that, maybe just a practical level in a city context for the discussion. I think I had conversations with about 45 CIOs or CTOs or CDOs, how you call them, but heads of tech in the context of a city, and most of them work at a municipality that wants to stimulate participation, so meaning citizen participation. And this is, some have whole departments called participation departments, or some have a person who's responsible next to another topic. No. But the topic of participation makes it a bit practical. For instance, I could argue that if you can participate as a citizen, as a human, then that could have a positive effect on how you feel, your self-worth, your dignity. Stimulating participation could be a way to at least have people experience dignity in this world. Now, my statement to these 45 people were how do you call it? Participation follows privacy. So if on the one hand you stimulate participation, everybody get involved, share your voice, but you don't guarantee privacy, then you're actually pushing everybody into a corner because you're collecting the data and stuff like that. And you cannot guarantee, as a city or the tax office, you cannot guarantee that the data will not be used, right? Or would merge with another database. And the whole making it practical on a city or citizen level, and these governmental bodies that want to stimulate somehow that you do it yourself, go online, participate. It can, for the statement, it can only be possible if you guarantee the privacy. And that's a world that I would want to live in. We don't need another right for that. We just need to guarantee that Article 1, and this one is, my whole thesis is that Article 1 is the pyramid, top of the pyramid, and the rest is deepening. So Article 12, privacy, is just part of dignity. Now, and it's theoretical, but we need. I would agree with Ben that it's already a challenge enough to move forward with Article 1.
Let's move forward to the next statement. And I'm also curious about you, Anouk. You have a lot of insights on this as well. So
I actually have a question, a follow-up on this, and maybe then afterwards we can discuss, because I think there's two things that are really interesting here. Indeed, the interconnections between the different rights and values. So is dignity the top of the iceberg, and does it kind of trickle down to privacy, or do we have perhaps some instances where there's a trade-off between certain values and rights. I think the COVID pandemic that we all experienced and the COVID app, that was a very clear example of how do we trade off this issue between privacy or health and our social interactions in the neighborhood. So maybe that's a topic that we can discuss a bit later, because there are some statements coming up on that. First, I want to ask a question, because I think we're all here together because we agree, right, that digital rights are very important, that we should emphasize them, that we should exercise them. And I hear several ideas on we should stick to the rights declaration that we already have, or maybe add new ones, or maybe first see how we actually do it. And then the question I would have would be, how do we actually do it, right? So how do we exercise those rights, and who does it? Yeah, maybe some of you can reflect on that.
Keep it short, but just to get it started. I think more now than in the past, at least in Europe, you could say that municipalities have a role. Because at the end of the day, the national governments in Europe are related to the European agreements. But cities like The Hague and Amsterdam also have a role in implementing technologies or making decisions. So one of the actors we need to include in Europe, at least, to move forward and have a more digital rights-driven or guaranteed society would be the municipality.
Seems a bit difficult, right? If every municipality has a different idea about rights, and so then basically where you live determines what your rights are. Isn't that a problem?
Yeah, a thing there is that I don't know if it's very different in every municipality, but that's why I say Europe at least. But I can imagine that there's an opportunity for cities, for municipalities to create a more clear identity, that you can choose where you want to live, but that's the other thing. But it has to be the case. That's my argument, and that is because we get these GDPR whatever laws. We don't want the TikTok affairs that were on the slides. But at the end of the day, somebody gives the permit, and if it's not the larger companies, and if the citizens don't have the power, and the public domain is busy with their own stuff, then who's going to save us? And a systemic approach would mean that you get all the actors at the table. And my statement would be that involve local governments as well. And that's to add to it, because they have a role in at least spending a lot of money on this.
Because I'm the non-digital rights non-expert here, the citizen, or say at least I thought the perspective from the professional, because I think a lot of people are making really small decisions regarding digital rights and privacy, but we can't oversee the spectrum, as not being a specialist. Even in our own university, I know we are going to experiment with the digital rights passport, or at least people are talking about it. And I haven't asked the professors over there if that's a good idea or not, but I said, yeah, go for it. And, and so a lot of people everywhere are taking really small steps without having really the in-depth knowledge that you have that is needed to oversee. Is that a good idea, or isn't it a good idea to proceed with this procedure or implementation of that? And of course, we should, or we want to have this systemic overview, and that and the CTOs in the municipalities, they should have way more knowledge than I have, but nobody can oversee everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because that's why we, in a way, we want to use these positive provocations to get people thinking about it, because it's hard to understand what's going on. So I think we're now into the theory a lot, and you were asking what can we do at a certain point. And I think that's what we try to do with the digital rights research team within Inholland, in workshops with students, that we try to make them imagine what it can mean. because it's so hard. I hear you say it's hard to imagine what this can mean, and for me as well. But I'm a designer and not a digital rights expert, and I think that what designers can have in their suitcase or in a toolkit is to help with this imagination. And positive provocations can help and support that, but it's also like prototypes. Huh? So you made really nice exhibition with students to get these kind of meanings of digital rights across. So maybe you can elaborate a bit on that, because I think that might also be inspiration instead of us going down into, oh, this is all very complicated and we cannot do anything. I also like to have this optimistic design mindset here next to, of course, it's complicated. Yeah.
Sure, and maybe just to build on what was said before, I think the great danger, if you talk about sort of practical possibilities, is this feeling of powerlessness. That there's a lot of people who think they can't do anything, it's not possible, I need to be a big expert. If I'm not a big expert, if I'm not a professor, I can't possibly like do anything useful, and I'll just have to like accept that they have all of my data and nothing will ever change. And I think that feeling in society is the biggest problem to changing digital rights, that you need to be an expert. And a lot of, this is where I think systemic also fails a little bit, because I've been part of a lot of groups of sort of bring all of the actors to the table, let's all sit together, let's discuss the issues, let's solve the problems. And what we miss is that there's a lot of bad actors in those roles who are not there to try and solve problems, but who make money off the data. And they lie in those tables and they misrepresent themselves, both in public and in private sector. That happens all the time. And we need to acknowledge that having all of the actors at the table might not actually solve anything, but might make things worse. And both at like very local level and extremely high level, this happens all the time. There's lots of very manipulative stakeholder management, manipulative stakeholder engagement that doesn't really lead to things. So just to, the systemic perspective may not, unless it includes these sort of political dimensions, always lead to the things that we want. So it's being aware of that and being aware of the incentives of people in the room. But then also to be optimistic, because that was the point of this conversation. Yeah, we're getting there. So we had some fantastic student installations where it was a combination of workshops that Wina was engaged with, but also other students and people working from Inholland, together with students from TU Delft, where they were trying to design different ways of sort of reinterpreting or imagining things. And one of the really fun installations they did was a photo booth, where you would go inside, it would take a picture of you, and then as you were leaving, it would take another picture of you from the side and from behind. But it didn't warn you or tell you anything about that. But there was a privacy policy very long at the front that nobody reads, of course, explaining that they would take full property and rights of the pictures that they just took of you. And then it asks you afterwards on an iPad whether it could post both the sort of the normal picture and the very unflattering one taken from the side as you were leaving on your TikTok. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can just say yes or yes. And so like it's sort of a beautiful allegory on how you feel trapped in a lot of these situations, but then also immediately after that giving you ideas on what you can do about it. So signing up to a petition to do something about this, engaging in different forms of understanding of how you can control your data, the technologies you can use. And so on the one hand, you need this moment of unsettling to be aware of it's not so, the ground beneath our feet is not as stable as it seems. It's a bit wobbly. But also then that doesn't mean that you're powerless as a result of that, but that you have opportunities, you have possibilities, there are things you can do without then saying, and that's sorry, because there's lots of caveats in this, that then means that each individual is individually responsible for that. Because that's the danger, right? If you just add privacy on your computer, everything will be fine. If you just use your technical skills to make things better, then it's all good. But it's not. It's always a collective problem and an individual problem together, and you can't separate the one from the other. And I think that's where the systemic perspective makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think it might be interesting as well to make these kind of prototypes or positive provocations for people who are working with government, for instance. And I think that would make more sense than having another law or another human right, because then people really experience it and then they will maybe behave differently, or that's what we're trying to do. And do you think that will be helpful for you if you get these kind of examples?
Well, yeah, I think what Ben is talking about with students, it's you can extend it to citizens, and you can extend it to professionals who make these very small decisions to collect data or not. Because if you if you invite people to an event, you make decisions about collecting data, very small decisions. But I think, and the people in the municipalities, or in our university, the people at the technical department, they make bigger decisions about data, but they can't solve all the world's problems because, they are also Ander can have his technical skills on his use his technical skills for his laptop and his telephone, but you can't. That won't solve the issue. And I think we, as institutions, municipalities or universities, we can behave well regarding data, but we are still in a world where we can't solve all the issues. We will need law and things for that. But being aware of what you can do without boring meetings and sitting at a table and not doing anything for you, I think it would be very, very interesting.
Maybe. Oh.
To me, it's also very much a coordination problem because, many actors do feel powerless. I've seen it everywhere, from small parties up to UN and the World Bank. They'll say, we're such a small organization, we're just the World Bank. What can we do about this? So everybody feels powerless in a way. So this is a coordination problem, because if we bring the right groups together, we can actually make a difference. But it takes, a coordinator, a commitment, and takes. That's also what I'm pushing for at our university, that we actually express that we are powerless and that we are looking for help, and not just accepting that we're powerless and looking for others. And that's also like a public spaces initiative and those kind of initiatives that bring all these powerless people together. And then all of a sudden you do discover that there's power in the collective. But this needs to be, there's a lot of work, and that's, I think, the main challenge.
I'm very curious about you, because I know you work with the homeless. We talked about this yesterday together. And I think you have a lot of issues with them, and how, I don't know if they are digital as well, but maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I've got lots of thoughts. So I guess there's, kind of digital inclusion comes in a lot. So, and also something that came up when everyone was talking is the idea of trust, and that we're talking about human rights as it is like everyone trusts it anyway. But I think there's a lot more work to do before you get to that, because we're sitting in a circle where we all are able to talk about articles. I can't just list off an article on Article 12. And so I'm kind of interested how there's that real gap of, like, do people, before digital human rights, do people know their human rights, and do they know what that means, kind of thing? So to me, it seems like there's, like, steps before that. I guess also there's, like, I don't know if it's kind of going off subject, but when you're kind of engaging with, say, public consultations or surveys online, it's like this feeling of just putting something out there and there's no feedback to it. So there's a definite, like, that's missing. That, and then once you have that bad experience, that you kind of, I don't want to be, a part of that, because I never know what that means to give that information. Who will see it and when will they see it? And who will discuss it and stuff like that. Those kind of questions come up. So I don't know if I've said anything important.
Yeah, I think it also relates to what we had at the stage, when you were on the stage, that somebody, I think a professor from Leiden University, was telling about that if you make a mistake and you do it twice, you get a red flag. And I think the vulnerable people, that's also why I looked at you. I think, they have a totally different position in this. That's what I hear you say.
Yeah, and I think, the kind of, if you make a mistake, so for example in the UK there's PIP forms, and if you make a mistake in that, then you don't get the money that you need. So that means a key worker like myself will have to go on a training form how to fill out this form and what kind of thing, because they are asked the same question but in multiple different ways. So that then you have to fill the form out of someone else, and there's kind of this, like, it's really dependent, that means, on the gatekeeper. You can't, it doesn't really empower someone, I don't think, because you're relying on someone again to help you fill out something that you want to get.
Maybe to add for some examples, There are two cases that come to mind, also addressing, I think, something you said earlier. So in Amsterdam, depending on the source, there's 30,000 or 60,000 undocumented people. And it doesn't matter if it's 30 or 60,000, it's a lot, right? But that means no bank account, no public transport opportunity, and no healthcare. Right? There's an opportunity here to let the people participate. But there's also a afweging, trade-off, and that's the privacy that you just said. And because, then somebody, or at least an institution, knows more about the undocumented people, and that could be misused. Now, it's a difficult situation because a municipality cannot accept all the people, because then everybody will come, and there's a lot of stuff in this little case. But you can also decide, that's the opportunity, and I have a second case, you can also decide what type of, say, environment, city context you want to be. So what would work so that these 60,000 people would feel more dignified and be part of, include them. And because their technology can play a role. You can have registered anonymity. It's a concept. Somebody says you're real, but we don't share your data. It's a concept. I think there's a lot of learning still out there that we can become more inclusive using technology without, harming people. And it's a decision. I just want to make another one, which is, and the thing would be you need to approach this systemically, or as a system. The other is that there's a city in the States that did not have the money, like most municipalities. And I like municipalities because they act with citizens. That's why. That does not have the money to put a sensor in every corner of the street to monitor air quality, so that they could, send a message to every citizen, stay inside or go to the left instead of the right. They don't have the money. But there's a case that some people that have asthma, or they have an inhaler. And you press the button, and then you get, stuff works. So somebody thought of putting a button on the button so you don't change the behavior. It's a design approach. And the button would register that somebody pressed the button, right? And they found out that there was a direct relationship between the number of buttons pressed and worse air quality. So they were happy because they had a low cost or a cheaper way to sense the air quality than they had. But they still didn't do it. And why didn't they implement this system? Because they could not, somebody from the government said, we cannot guarantee that this database of people that do this will be merged with another database we have of poor people, because it was the same group. And they didn't want to create profiles of citizens that were unhealthy and poor. And I think this is a nice example that you can create something which is logical, has a return on investment, all that thinking, but at the end of the day, you do not want to do for other reasons. And that's what I wanted to point out, that in the context of a city, but also everywhere in the world, there's so many new cases, situations arising where we can make a different decision with technology, but using technology as an opportunity.
I think that obviously in the Netherlands, the use of data, has a specific kind of history, and in the 40s in particular, the handling of data and what that revealed about citizens was had a very specific outcome. I just want to give an example. When I was working in service design in the UK, in London, I was working for an organisation. We were developing an app for social workers that worked with children, vulnerable children, and we were trying to take a very systemic kind of look at it, because for a whole host of data rights issues, what you don't want is some sort of database you can log in and all this data is revealed about an individual, in particular a child, which has a whole other set of protection around them. So the app kind of, we developed in such a way that what it did is that if you had a connection with a child, if you're a practitioner, if you're a teacher, or if you are a social worker and you have data, if you hold 3 pieces of data on a child, you can put it into this database and it will give you back anyone that holds the same 3 pieces of data of that child. So if it has the child's age, their address, and maybe their school. So you can therefore understand the entire systemic network of care around that child, which was very interesting kind of as a solution. But where it became very, very difficult is that when we were trying to connect and develop a family picture, and when you start to connect families that aren't potentially married in law, and you have different partners, and you have a whole set of different partners in a household that might have one parent with 4 children with all different parents that then potentially can link into their cases. And what is revealed in terms of, in the same way as what you were talking about, in terms of, I suppose, the actual lived experience of poverty and all what surrounds it, is potentially very, very damaging for lots of people in that network for lots of different reasons, because of how abuse happens and various other things. And I think it comes back to, in a way, what we do in the real world, in the echte wereld, and the kind of non-data world, because what the data is tracking in terms of what we put into systems has a potential to reveal things that people can make assumptions about in terms of people's particular lifestyles. And therefore, all those kind of mechanisms that then, if you put a layer of technology over it that starts to use that data to infer particular decision-making, and what happened, for example, in the UK around allocation of people that were declared to work who are completely incapacitated, and as a result they lose payments and then they die, essentially. The potential impact is death. And equally, when I first came to the Netherlands in Rotterdam, there was a lot of graffiti or kind of like pictures up of police officers that had taken part in protests that were against this welfare cheating scandal. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of like pushback, because they were saying, okay, we have pictures of you from you policing us, protesting your government actions, and we are going to put them publicly. Let's see how you like your data being used. And I thought that was a very, very interesting provocation. And it stayed with me. It was the first day I walked around the lab, and it stayed with me, kind of like, this is very interesting. This community in Rotterdam South, they don't feel that they have agency, but they are using kind of the fact that they were able to, on their phone, take pictures of riot officers protesting them. And I think that was really interesting, because they took their agency back there. And in some of the things that like the example of patchwork that I was saying there with the system, that if we had did it, potentially revealed all sorts of terrible information about individuals, but also family, that the impacts of that could have been potentially really, really dangerous. So I don't know if I'm making any point here, but I think the systemic aspect is so crucial to be able to see what the actual impacts, kind of multiplier effects, etc., could be from some of these decisions.
I'm going to try to summarize kind of the points, or try to connect some dots and maybe move on to a different topic. But I also really love the conversation that's going on. And I think what I hear you say is also indeed when we are relying on a lot of data collection and analyzing and applying from that point, deviating from the norm kind of becomes even more of a challenge, right? It's already, when you deviate from the norm in normal life, you're already sometimes being watched. But doing that in a digital sphere, whether it is because your household has a different formation than might be regular or expected, whether you fill in the right form in the right way, yes or no, and you're flagged twice. With the welfare scandal, what your nationality is a big deviation from the norm, right? So these are all very scary things. And actually now I was thinking I'm feeling more and more again a bit negative. So I'm trying to find a way back to, okay, what can we do? And I think also I went to this slide, and I want to from this statement, I mostly want to focus on the citizen, because I think also here we said a couple of times the citizens are very important. What can the citizens do to exercise their rights? And I think that's also a question that I am stuck with now, because I think it was you this morning, I'm not sure, don't want to point you out here, but talking about exercising rights. Why, when it comes to, for example, what's happening now at the highway. So Extinction Rebellion and many people who want to focus on climate change, they're exercising their rights very physically there on the highway. When it comes to the digital sphere, I'm a bit pondered on how we do that. And I think also there I want to link to the systemic aspect. Because if it comes to cookies, for example, right, that's an individual choice you can make. I'm one of those persons who indeed goes through like the 5 clicks you have to make to say, I don't want the cookies, because I'm into this topic very much, but it's an effort you have to make. And in the end of the day, the company really doesn't care if they have my cookies or not, because, I mean, they have enough, right? And also, I think connecting that to the another comment that was made this morning, privacy is becoming a luxury, right? So I know a story also of a woman and her son had mental health issues. She explicitly decided not to go through the municipality to get help, so to avoid the municipality actually as a stakeholder, to not become part of the systems, to not become one of the ones or zeros, and to not deviate from the norm, right? So in that sense, but it's a very individual action that you can take. And I'm wondering what type of influence that's had on the bigger scale. So if I don't accept the cookies or if I avoid the municipality, what type of effect does that have? And maybe what can citizens do to exercise their rights? Very open question, but I see Jake is...
I'm looking at Ben for positive answers.
Exactly, but...
He has to think.
He's keeping quiet.
No, but positivity or seeing the opportunity or the will to change, right? I think it's all in the positive sense. Yeah, so starting with one comment is that you could say that the digitalization is a development and sustainability, the climate is another development. But they have Greta, they have a melting iceberg, they have the picture of a ice bear on a melting iceberg. They have the Brundtland report, and they're already busy since 1987. But what's the Greta or the melting iceberg or the ice bear or the Brundtland report of digital rights? So one of the opportunities is to create that. So we need narrative, we need stories, we need these clear actors if you want to create more movement. That's a concept. You can disagree or not, but it's more clear on the climate side than on the digital rights side at the moment. The other is I see an opportunity for everybody here because I see these logos and I don't view these institutions like Inholland or everybody here as researching what's external, but they represent the citizen. Some have 10,000 students, the other have 60,000 students. But what came to mind is that these positive provocations could be continuous. So I see a role for all these, institutes to become a new or modern museum, as you will. You don't go to the Rijksmuseum to get inspired or take time, but for instance, I go to Inholland, and if you would have a permanent exhibition of these digital rights, inspiring situations, positive provocations, then we have the first international network of organizations doing that. And if you then on the door of every building put a sticker and call it a digital rights label, which I think we now already did a session on, and then you say it says we as an institute are working on it. So just to summarize and give the mic to somebody else, it could be very close by. We could take initiative and create the Greta, create the picture of the melting iceberg, create stuff like that. We could, as institutes, now sign the manifest that we will, or the covenant, that we will become the first, network of the open museum positive provocation movement.
And then a section name.
And then the third, what we can do is we could all say we want this certificate or this label on our door that says it's a digital rights label, we're working on it, at least showing that we're working on it. It's not an A, it's not green, if you look at the energy label, but we're working on it. And at the end of the day, I believe there's a lot of positivity in creating these narratives, creating these icons, creating these positive provocations as an installation. But that's not my work. So.
But then I would wonder, you know, I think it's very nice to look at to compare the digital rights with the climate change movement. And although yesterday Jayita Gupta told us about the alphabet cloud of UN organizations and how difficult it is to get any movement over there, I mean, I do see that there are the Greta's and there is Extinction Rebellion, and it's not for the digital rights. I think I see, you know, from our universities of applied sciences point of view, I do see some nice developments there that at least for all the business school educational programs, so the higher economic education in the Netherlands, there has been said that all of the programs should work and contribute to what is called technological citizenship. So that is the awareness of what technology plays a role for these students and citizens in their life, and that could be, you know, we can take that, use that concept, and say, okay, we make it. We add a rights perspective to the technological citizenship idea, because you know that's only on paper, and nobody knows what we mean with that technological citizenship. But I think that's comparable with that. You know, educational programs should contribute to awareness on climate change, because students should be aware of sustainability and diversity and inclusion. But so technological citizenship is added there, and I think it's very, very good and important. And then I think for the, you know, for the provocations or for the logos on the door, I would challenge you, because I don't think that the logos on the door do too much. But if you compare it with climate change, you know, having vegan options in the canteen won't solve the world's problems either. But people feel that they can make choices, and if all people go to a vegan diet, that has a huge impact on climate change. So for the digital rights, I do think that we need to have this, you know. So yeah, you can make choices with cookies, but I mean, I think that the average student or citizen or professional is missing the day-to-day life changes that we can and should make. So, not saying that I'm not an expert enough, but I do think that then we need we need awareness of our agency and have it as concrete as possible.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would actually love to work more on that, also from the Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences. I'm actually pushing for this all the time, but you know, not to end with a negative note, but then we also ask our students to install proctoring software. We send all their grades through Osiris to the United States. There's so many problems there. So yeah, well, we need to start somewhere. I totally agree, but we also have to be very mindful of ethics washing. Putting things on the door is like, you know, and it's so hypocrite to do that at this stage. And also, I do have to leave a little bit early. I apologize for that. I was really enjoying the conversation. But, you know,
and then just to provide something positive, like all of the things you're suggesting, we're already doing in many ways. So the installations we're talking about, they'll become permanent at Inholland, the Hague campus. So there'll be multiple student art projects that are literally taking place at the entrance. And that just provides ways of engaging with that without being an expert, but understanding a little bit these things. And both the Inholland, the Hague campuses and other campuses like, yeah, this is great, give us more of this stuff. So I don't think we could do, I don't think it's impossible to do things. I think that if we think about, because you mentioned this Greta movement as well, and sort of this idea of like, what is the moment for that in digital rights? I don't think that didn't happen. I just think it happened in ways that are different from what it would happen in other contexts. So it's not that digital rights isn't a thing, but it's hard to argue that digital rights, if they don't happen, are going to end the world. And with certain things related to climate change, it's a little bit more straightforward to make that line be drawn. But I do think what you can argue is that it'll make people's lives materially much worse if we don't have digital rights, and especially people who are particularly vulnerable. And I think this link to vulnerability, identifying those systems where vulnerable people already are and need support, understanding where that vulnerability is, and also helping the people who develop or work in those systems understand that they're literally leading through digitization in these ways to the opposite of what the system is meant to be there for. Like there's this obsession with fraud in all of the benefit systems, where there's so much obsession with the idea that people are defrauding the system that they end up hurting the people they're meant to be protecting.
Yeah, distrust instead of trust. Huh? That's
as the default, but not even distrust. It's literally there's so many hoops that you need a PhD to understand how to fill out the form. There's so much constant checking and constant very aggressive monitoring of people that you end up not... We have like done numerous work on this with it, and it all comes down to the same thing. The social safety net, the social protection net that should be there, is based on the idea that there's a safety net. But if that net is designed to bite you, to hurt you, to make your life difficult in any possible way, there's no net anymore. And that affects the vulnerable people most first.
Okay, but you were asking for actions of us doing things, or citizens doing things. Oh, there's another one there. But I think what you were saying is that you can change maybe the system of the economic educations in the Netherlands by putting this digital rights into the technology citizenship, right? So this could mean for a first system change. You can bring it to the table there, for instance. Yeah, so that's what you can do. But I think it's interesting to see what we can all do. So what can we do for this safety net to repair it again or make it something else?
Well, so when we were discussing before about it being a design question, it's literally about designing systems in a way that like the safety of the individuals, the safety net, the idea, that's the default. And that's the thing where basically we've worked together with different agencies around the world to set guidelines for those principles to say, you're not doing your job properly if you design digital systems in this way. That it's not about the digital, but it's about the core idea of protecting vulnerable people in the first place. And once you start understanding that and realizing, as soon as I design in a mechanism that is there to prevent fraud, I'm actually inverting the system. And the problem with that is that if you were to do an installation in that, an art installation, to imagine how to stand, you literally have to explain to a government bureaucrat in the tax office or somebody else what it feels like to have your children taken away.
Exactly.
Now, I don't feel comfortable ethically building that installation. It sounds like a terrible thing. But at the same time, that's the feeling that they would need to understand.
But maybe you should not do it that literally, but you can do it in a different way.
Exactly.
But I hear you say we need experiences and empathy, create empathy, so we get this awareness, and then maybe people will move.
I think that's the main mechanism that we have to create that understanding, because I don't think it's necessary. It's that people are stuck in boxes, right? They see that I'm only responsible for my little box, and they don't see the larger connection. Which
and they're still humans, so they have feelings. So
of course,
yeah,
and
we
they
need
do care.
just to connect to that.
Totally.
To add to what Ben said, I think it will be short, but is all those ideas, installations, labels, using a course, or all this stuff. I personally believe we need to do all of it. Right, and that we cannot judge if it's a good idea or not, but we need to do more. That's one reaction. The other is that we also must understand that we are not an institution. And all the logos here of this expertise network, they have 100 or 200,000 citizens in their ecosystem. So let's start by focusing on ourselves. And that point. Every other day I have a conversation with a student, with a school or with a youth organization, because that's a part of the projects we do, and they look out what they can do outside. But if they would do it with their own people, and if everybody would do that, and the HVA has 60,000 students, now that's already less than maybe 8% of Amsterdam, right? So if you start by looking at what you can do, then there's a lot of, that's a way it can be infectious, right? Others do it as well. And there's an opportunity to be the first, maybe. Just a little thing is on the social and empathic part is that what I find ridiculous is the following. Is, for instance, take an average school. So there are students, kids, and they have parents. Some have parents. And then they... Now all of the schools that I'm talking to, they're looking at how to involve parents to do stuff with the kids when it comes to digital developments. But they approach it as a different actor. Our 80% of our time is on the kids, and we have to do some ouderavonden, elderly evenings, because it's part of the process. But if you would rethink your whole, say, ecosystem or your whole network of people that you originally have, like all these logos have neighborhoods, have students, have companies that partner. But if you look at them as just a large group of people, then that's your network. And if you would use that network to roll out this thinking, then that's, I think, the most easiest way to play a role. That's the first thing that you can do tomorrow.
Sorry, I really want to give you the word, and you will. But just a very brief interruption, because about 8 minutes ago, I got the message that we only had 5 minutes left, okay. So we're going over time. Just so please have your word, and if anybody else has any comments, but just so you know, then probably there will be a plenary reflection coming in.
Yeah. No, kind of what you were saying was making me think about and talking about like empathy and stuff like that, and maybe as well as kind of trying to embody empathy within stakeholders or kind of whatever situation you're in, is also creating roles for people with lived experience, so that we're not trying to do the job again. We're not just trying to recreate something so someone understands it or tries to understand it, but actually how do we get people in lived experience, like having lived experience, into these conversations more? Because I think there's sometimes that can be quite, I've been to walks where we're trying to understand how it feels to be physically disabled in a green space, and we were given special glasses and stuff, and that's really offensive to someone that has those disabilities. Like they should be there. It shouldn't be that we try and understand.
Yeah. So next time we will have also people here from the Digital Rights House network. So we invite people that you talk to. Yeah, I think that will be great. Thank you. Yeah, we have to... I think I give you the last word.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a very interesting conversation, and I hope we can follow up this conversation during drinks or whenever. And also one last question, because they are doing a reflection of each workshop. So there might be Joya is her name. She might pick some of you for a little 5-minute reflection in front of camera if you want. If you don't want, no problems. But just a heads up. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Anouk.